Ami Ayalon, thank you so much for joining us on UpFront.
Thank you, Mark.
As we record, negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza continue to advance. But many are asking, even if there were to be a ceasefire, what happens next? Now, you've stated that you hope Israeli society will demand, and I quote, security, democracy, and an end to the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories, because the three are inseparable. But this idea strays quite far from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's intentions, which currently suggests taking indefinite control over the security and civilian affairs of Gaza. How do you respond to Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan?
Well, I do not respond to Netanyahu because this is the beauty of democracy. I represent myself. I do not represent the Israeli people. Many of the Israelis agree with me, but as long as he is a prime minister, as much as I don't like it, he represents the state of Israel. So I'm not negotiating with Netanyahu. I'm telling what I believe in. I hope that Israelis will listen. I hope that the world will listen, your audience, for example. And finally, since it is a democracy, I hope that we shall have elections as soon as possible, and then the Israeli people will vote for another leader.
I guess my question is, why do you disagree with Prime Minister Netanyahu? You said you don't like it. What don't you like about his plan?
Okay, let me go back a little bit and to start with trying to explain to foreign people the way we understand the reality in the Middle East and the Israeli point of view. On the 7th of October, I think that we experienced something that we couldn't imagine that ever we shall face. Now, why it is so important to start with this? Because you have to understand that we went to a war, and the way we understand this war is a just war. But even a just war must end, because war should never be the goal of itself. And my discussion or debate or the reason why I do not agree with Netanyahu is that the way I understand him, he do not have intent. He do not have any intent to end this war. For him, it is a kind of an endless war. And another idea when I speak about this war, when we fight Hamas, which is a terror fundamentalist organization, and I'm not saying all the Palestinians are the same, but Hamas as an organization, in a way, it is a totally different type of war. We are fighting on two dimensions. One is on the military battle, on the battlefield. And yes, it is a military war. But the other and the most important dimension is a war of ideas. And what I claim is that in order to defeat Hamas, it is not enough to dismantle his military capability and his political leadership. And this is what we are doing. But I think that the war must end today.
When you talk about an end to the war, one of the things that Netanyahu has talked about, in addition to actual military engagement, is the question of a Palestinian state. He's saying very explicitly at this point that a Palestinian state is a non-starter.
I totally disagree with Netanyahu. And just to support my view, I think that in this case, all the world agree with me. If you listen to the American voice, European voice, all the Arab states and all the Muslim states who signed on the Arab Peace Initiative, I think that only Iran and its, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis did not sign within the Arab and the Muslim world. And if you listen to Russia and China, all the world accept the future of two states as the only realistic view in order to bring an end to this conflict. So Netanyahu and, unfortunately, the Israeli government today do not accept it.
Let me ask you a question, because you raised an interesting point about international consensus. You say that the world, the dominant majority of countries around the world, the Arab states, Europe, et cetera, are all calling for two states. There's a similar consensus around the globe that Israel has committed war crimes. There is a similar international and global consensus that Israel has contravened international law. Do you accept global consensus on those issues as well?
No, I don't.
Why?
I don't, and I started by saying, first of all, that it is a just war. When we try to understand
but I'm making, just to be clear, I'm making a distinction between what you're calling sort of the impetus for the war and the actual practices within the war. There are some people who might agree with you with the war, but say in the practice of war, because 30,000 people have been killed, because 2/3 of those people are women and children, because the Geneva Conventions have been violated by, bombing mosques and schools and hospitals, so many civilians have been indiscriminately targeted, that perhaps even if one were to accept that the war itself was just as a mission, that in practice you've still violated so many laws. Why do you think international consensus is so overwhelming?
I don't think that there is an international consensus. I think that this is a view of the street in many places, but I don't think that this is a view of most of the lawyers that deals with international law. You have to understand that I have the right to attack every target if it is a military target. And I have to explain you something about why the war in Gaza is so problematic. Because it is the first war that we are fighting, which is in a so populated area, and there is no way to attack a legitimate target without killing, unfortunately, without any intent, civilians. This is the one reason. The second reason...
Well, let me ask you about your first reason before you jump to the second reason. Again, even if one were to accept your argument that casualties are inevitable in war, international law does not suggest or does not allow for you to indiscriminately kill civilians. It does not allow. It does not absolve you of your responsibility to make sure that civilians are evacuated from a hospital, for example. And then finally, I want to get your response to this. And then also, you say these are legitimate military targets, but when you blow up a hospital or when you destroy a school or a mosque, these are not military targets as such. And the only way they would become military targets is if they were to lose that status. And to date, there's been almost no evidence presented by the state of Israel that these targets have lost their status, their protected status, and that they are legitimate military targets. And even if they were, because Hamas is in there, you still have to evacuate civilians. You still have to give civilians time to get away. If civilians don't leave, you don't just get to blow up the place because the civilians haven't left a home or a refugee camp, for example. What do you make of that?
So what is the question?
Sure.
What is the question?
My question is, what do you make of the Geneva Conventions and all these other international legal statutes that make it very clear that you don't have the ability or the right to blow up houses of worship or hospitals or schools simply because you believe that a Hamas agent may be in there without taking proper measures and without making sure that civilians are protected?
Okay, I heard you. I'm not sure that you really know the facts, with all the respect. It is not that we believe that Hamas is using it. It is because we know it and we presented real evidence in every case. In the case of mosques, in the case of hospitals, which we did not attack, by the way. So what I am trying to explain is the first war ever in which, in this case, Hamas, the organization, or what we call the government in Gaza, is using the civilians as a human shield. I'm not inventing it. You just have to go to the internet and to look
What,
into
what, what, what,
Hamas.
what evidence do you have of that, sir? Because to date, I've seen no evidence presented.
It's clear evidence. Go to Hamas website for the last 10 years.
The Hamas website?
Hamas website, yes.
You're saying that your proof that Hamas is using human shields is that on Hamas's website?
Yes.
What does Hamas say on Hamas.com?
Listen, can I have a few minutes in order to give you a response?
Yeah, but I'm just asking what the evidence is, because you haven't presented any evidence. You just said go to Hamas's website. And you're suggesting that on Hamas's website they acknowledge that they use human shields? That's your argument?
Yes.
Okay, I've seen no evidence of that.
Let me finish my argument and then do whatever you want, okay? I'm telling you, go to Hamas website, and for the last 10 years, all what they're saying, their strategies is to bring Israel to the middle of the cities in order for the Israelis, soldiers, to kill as many civilians as possible, and then the world will understand, and then the world will support them. This is the strategy. And in addition, you know, in Gaza, they built this huge shelter. The underground city of Gaza is used only by Hamas activists and Hamas commanders. No Palestinian civilian can hide there.
If it is true that Hamas's strategy is to hide in the middle of civil society and surround themselves with civilians, if that is true, are you suggesting that you then have a right to attack them there and indiscriminately kill civilians?
No, only in case in which we know for sure that this is a military target. And unfortunately, when we hit a military target, unfortunately, and without any intention, civilians are dying. This is what I'm saying.
So Israel has now killed 30,000 people. Over 12,500 of those 30,000 people are children. On average, 10 children are losing limbs every day. And as they near starvation, there are several reports of people eating grass and animal feed to survive. This is the reality. At the end of November, you said that you, quote, don't think that the military can achieve its goals without doing exactly what they are doing today. Now, as we sit here in March of 2024 with 30,000 dead, you know, 2/3 of them women and children, 12,500 kids dead, 10 children losing limbs every day. Do you still believe that the military is doing exactly what they have to be doing?
No, you are not listening. I said that the military action on the ground, if you ask me, we have to stop it immediately. And this is why what I'm telling you now, that we achieved all the military goals which we can achieve. Every day when we go on fighting, we are achieving nothing because of the humanitarian disaster which is creating. Even if it is not what we want, this is the intention of Hamas. And we are losing this war not because we are losing on the battlefield.
How does Hamas become implicated in this? For example, when there are 100 people or 112 people who are killed defenseless effectively while waiting for a humanitarian aid truck, and Israeli forces kill them even though they are not engaging in any kind of military action, how is that Hamas's fault and not just the Israeli military's?
For me, to stop this interview is just to push a button. If we shall go on.
No, I know you're willing to push a button.
No.
What I'm saying is, under what circumstances? Under what circumstance? What does Hamas have to do with some of these actions? I'm just asking.
There are some rules to every interview.
Just like there are rules to war, and we have to abide by the rules. And my question for you is, when 112 people are killed seeking humanitarian aid by Israeli military forces, is that Hamas's fault, or is that purely the fault of the Israeli military? I'll give you an opportunity to answer.
No, it is the responsibility of no one. It is a humanitarian disaster that Hamas wanted to be created, and we did not understand it, and we are going on with the use of military power. What I am trying to explain, my view is that we have to agree to a ceasefire immediately, because we are losing the war of ideas. the second dimension of this war is a war of ideas. And in order to defeat Hamas, we have to do both. So we did all what we can do in order to dismantle its military power. And we should not go on doing it. What we have to do is to create a political horizon. And the political horizon, which all the world support, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, Emirates, Morocco, all the Arab states who signed on the Arab Peace Initiative. And the day that Hamas will be defeated only if we shall create a better future for Palestinians and for Israelis. Now, the moment that we shall create a process that will bring us to a reality of two states, Hamas is defeated. He will not be supported by more than 15% of the Palestinians. And this is the end of Hamas. Okay, they will stay as a political minority. I have no problem with it. This is my view.
Understood. In December, you spoke about how there are too many what you call chaos agents in Israel, whose political goal is to create a human disaster in Gaza. You call this radical and fundamental, stating, quote, this is exactly the theology and the strategy of ISIS and of Al-Qaeda. Who are these chaos agents in your estimation?
You have just to listen to some Israeli politicians. I can tell you Ben Gvir and Smotrich, and they are sitting in our government. I totally disagree with them. Unfortunately, they were elected, and unfortunately, they brought us to create this disaster. And this is exactly what Hamas expected. And this is why they are celebrating, and this is why they are getting support by more and more Palestinians and more people in Arab states.
That makes sense. So from your perspective, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Benjamin Netanyahu, this whole cohort of people are advancing a kind of extremist ideology designed to create humanitarian disaster.
By the way, you mentioned Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't think that this is what he wanted, but he created a coalition, and he do not control his coalition.
And is this extremist coalition guiding the policies of Israel?
Yes.
And are they being successful in guiding the policies of Israel, in persuading Netanyahu?
Up to now, yes.
Okay, so you said that, just so I got this right, there are extremists who are guiding the policies of Israel toward humanitarian disaster in Gaza. These people are successful in intentionally creating humanitarian disasters in Gaza. And yet when I ask you, is Israel responsible for humanitarian disasters in Gaza, you say no.
Okay.
Do you see the contradiction there? You said they're guiding him successfully toward creating humanitarian disaster, and then I say, hey, there's a humanitarian disaster, and you say it ain't our fault. Please explain the contradiction.
Okay, the contradiction is that Hamas is responsible to this disaster, and we are stupid enough to help him.
Okay.
This is the way I explain it.
Okay.
This is the dream of Hamas, and we did not understand it from the very beginning, and we are paying the price. Unfortunately, Palestinians, thousands of Palestinians are paying the price because we did not understand that this is the dream of Hamas. And in addition, we were locked because after the 7th of October, we had to go to war against Hamas, and this is the result.
So you believe that the problem here is that the Israeli government at this stage has fallen into Hamas's trap by...
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So falling into Hamas's trap doesn't absolve you from your responsibilities in international law. It doesn't absolve you from the crime of genocide. It doesn't absolve you of any contraventions of international law. But let's move on. Let's move on because I want your insight on something, sir.
Man, I have to tell you something. You do not understand what genocide is all about.
What's genocide?
Please, what genocide is? Genocide is to kill a people. with
In
intention.
whole or in part? Hold on. Sorry. In whole or in part by international law? In whole or in part? Based on a racial, ethnical, or national identity. That's according to international law. And again, 1% of the child population in Gaza has been killed. One out of 75 Gazans has been killed.
We do not have a war with the Palestinians. We have a war with Hamas.
But you're killing Palestinians.
All our generals are saying again and again and again, we have to do everything in order not to hit civilians, because this is not our war.
So just to use your example, if the commanders are saying do everything you can not to hit civilians, and 112 civilians are killed while waiting for humanitarian aid, unarmed, and by all accounts not at all confronting the Israeli military, who's responsible? I'll ask you again.
First of all, it was a huge mistake. If you ask me, we tried to bring humanitarian aid, food and everything. And this convoy was attacked by people who lost any control. And it was a huge problem, a huge mistake. And I hope that we shall not do it again.
It was the military's, it was the IDF's mistake, you're saying?
It was an Israeli mistake, yes.
Okay, no, great, because earlier in the interview you said it was nobody's fault. So I'm glad you've moved on that point.
It was an Israeli state.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you saying. I appreciate you saying that. Earlier in the interview you said something different. So I'm glad that we have clarity now that it was their fault.
No. When you raised this case,
I
did not say anything.
I said whose fault was it? How was it Hamas's fault? And you said it's not anyone's fault.
No, not the case.
Okay, it's fine. We don't have to quibble. The audience will see for themselves. You called for the release of jailed Palestinian leader Marwan Barghouti, which is also one of the current demands of Hamas. You said that this would create the conditions for meaningful negotiations. For many, Barghouti is viewed as their Nelson Mandela. And recent polls suggest that he would be a prime candidate to lead if he were released. And there were open elections. Do you believe that his release could lead to more diplomacy or a way forward in the conflict?
I think that the process that I see is end the military operation with a ceasefire and bringing back all the hostages and releasing all the Palestinian prisoners that we have to release in order to achieve this deal. And once he will be released, what I'm afraid of, that the Palestinians will go to elections without a political horizon. And I hope that when we shall create the political horizon, which will be supported by all the world, America, Saudi Arabia, and all the Arab states, when he will be released, only then they will go to elections. And the way I understand the Palestinian society is they will vote for Marwan Barghouti. And Marwan Barghouti believes he is not a Hamas activist. He believes in two states. He fought because he did not believe that we shall give Palestinian a state unless they will fight. So whether he was right or wrong, I'm not discussing it now. This is history. We did mistakes during Oslo. Palestinians did mistakes. All of us did mistakes. And the responsibility is shared. I'm trying to discuss the future. And this is why I think that when a better horizon will be created and when Palestinians will go to elections, he should be released and he should be a candidate. And the way I understand Palestinians, they will vote for him.
Mr. Ayalon, I appreciate your time. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Well, not so soon, but thank you very much.
Take care. Everyone, that is our show.